Good evening. Tonight we're gathered here to have a discussion about the county manager recruitment work session. And with that, I'll turn it over to the ladies of the state, Donna and Amy.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. First of all, I want to thank you for allowing Jonna Sharp and myself to work with you on this process. Also, thank you for your willingness to have this special meeting today. This indicates your dedication and commitment to this process today, and I think that's an extremely good start. But I do want to reiterate, this is your process. The recruitment process is your process. We're here to help you facilitate. We want to help you create and execute a very defined process. But again, it truly is your process. Recruitment and selection is probably one of the most important decisions that you'll ever make in finding the county manager that is best suited for Caswell County. But I will say the key to success is the board's consensus around a structured process. That's extremely important. You may not like every minor detail, but at the end of today, we're hoping that we can get consensus on several important issues and thoughts and parts of the process so that we can begin that process for you. So you may be wondering, what's so important about a well-defined process? First of all, a structured process is going to help you recruit and attract experienced applicants for the process, and I believe that's what you're looking for. Also, today starts with transparency. Having this meeting and this work session is transparent. It helps the public to have confidence in your process and then the final selection. And a good process, a thorough one, which we've laid out today, has multiple steps for evaluation of all of the candidates. The next, we'll go to slide number 3. I think Ashley's working with the technology.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the purpose of today's session. And so on slide 3, there's 4 particular areas that we'd like to talk about. One is we want to agree on the job profile. The profile is an important piece to the process. Basically, you're building the characteristics that you want in a manager. And you started that process by completing the surveys that were sent out in advance. I'm pleased to say that we received 6 of the surveys, and I want to thank you for taking the time to complete those surveys. And in just a moment, John is going to give you the feedback from your work. Number 2 is we need to talk about the recruitment plan and build the timeline. And then John is going to come back up and talk about the actual application process. There are a lot of details in that area. And then finally, we want to talk about the interview process as well as the selection process. So I've talked a lot the first few minutes, but we want to hear from you. This really needs to be an interactive process. If you have questions, please stop us, or if you have comments. And we're going to pause because at each step, we want to make sure and see if there's a consensus before we move on. So let me stop there and ask you if you have any questions at this point. If not, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask Jonna to come up and talk about building the job profile.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Nice to be with y'all again. And I'm going to jump right on. We're going to move to slide 5. Ashley, thank you. You're already there. As we look at, before we get into your survey results, as we look at kind of building out when we do the job profile, what are going to be the duties and responsibilities. We wanted to just start, first of all, with what the statutory responsibilities are according to North Carolina general statutes. And it's 153A, 883, outlines the powers and the duties of a manager. And I don't think there's anything on here that should be a surprise to you, but it's very important that we make sure the candidate that you select, or that we help provide, the candidates that we provide to you have the knowledge, skills, and background in order to successfully perform these functions. And I think as we go through your survey results, there are several of these functions that you all collectively have said is somewhat more important than the other, and we'll get to that in a minute. But in terms of general powers, duties, general overall responsibilities, is there anything that you think is missing from this list in the statutes? It's pretty comprehensive from all the way from your HR to being appointing the employees of the county, to being the budget officer, and to providing you whatever reports you as the board deem necessary in order for you to make the policy decisions for the county. All right, we'll keep going. So the first part, so I want to dive now into the surveys that you were provided back to us. And the first set of questions was along the line of different preferences and what you all would like to see. The first one was asked about, are you looking for someone who's got some broad experience or is really specialized in a few areas? And the majority of you said broad, a couple of you said specialized, there wasn't any specific specialty listed. So if there's anything specifically that any of you all want to comment on today that we want to make sure we highlight and maybe we'll go through the rest of the survey and then we can come back and say, is there anything else that you want to make sure that you highlight in the job profile that isn't covered here? And if there is any specific types of experience that aren't addressed in the survey, let us know, because we want to make sure we're capturing all of your thoughts. We asked a question on what was most important to you, education or experience. And all of you said experience, and one person said they want both. So I think that is clear that, you know, we want somebody to have the appropriate education background, but it seems to you all that it's more important to have someone that brings a good experience mix. Then this was interesting on kind of looking at what do you value more, process or results? And that was split. So I think what we need to look at is someone who can do both. I mean, everybody's got their preferences, but really it's important for somebody to be able to deliver both, to be a good county manager. So I think that's interesting that the board is looking for someone that's well-rounded and can do both of those. And then we also asked a question about your willingness to consider different types of government background, because there's different ways you can go. You can typically go with someone that's already a manager who might be seeing this as an opportunity to maybe move to a bigger community or move to the country. So we wanted to see if, you know, that was something you were looking for. But what you may likely see also is an assistant manager in another community who's ready to step into the manager role. And it seems like there's openness on all of that. And then there was also one respondent who said they don't want to close the door on private sector experience. So I think that gives us a good way. This will come more into play in terms of what's in the job application, but also maybe what's in the preferences, because we'll have the minimum qualifications or the basic qualifications that the county's desiring, but then what are those preferreds? So anything else to mention on these categories? And I think when you look at how we will lay out the knowledge, skills, and abilities required, it's going to be looking, what experience does that person have that can kind of prove that they've done this type of work? So that will be part of our job through the screening process to see if we can tease that out, to make sure that whatever background they might be bringing, they bring the total package that's needed to successfully be your manager. So next slide, if we can go to, thank you, Ashley, she's reading my mind. Back up to slide 7. The next area we asked you to kind of rank in your priority order, experience preferences. And what we provided here is we wanted to make sure we showed you all of the responses so you can see how everyone ranked them. But what I tried to do is really look at where is their consensus as to what are the top 3. So I went through and I said, what were the top 3 ranked for each of the commissioners who responded? And it was pretty clear that you're seeking a strong administrative leader, that you want someone with strong financial management experience, and that the next one in the tier was strategic planning. And I honestly think those are the fundamentals. Those are the basics. That's the foundation. And you want someone who is well skilled at all 3 of those areas to be a successful manager. And some of the other categories we had, emergency management, I can see why that's not a priority. If you lived in Nags Head, that might be a bigger priority. But here in Caswell, I'm not sure what kind of emergencies you generally have. So I think where you set your priorities makes sense from what I see about your community and the time that I've spent with you all. On slide 8, then we looked at the personal characteristics. And I think, again, there were some really clear agreement on motivates and mentor staff and collaborative management skill. And I think those will be things that we want to make sure throughout the process, that if these things are important to you, how can the applicants demonstrate that to you? So that will be incumbent upon Amy and I as we design questions and design the process, that how can we make sure that the person, your preferred candidate, brings these skills. But collaborative management style, excellent communicator, motivates and mentors staff, and innovative and strategic. I see a theme there with the strategic. So really kind of helping, where's the county going in the next 5 years, 10 years? And how can this manager play a role in helping you all achieve what your goals and objectives are for the county? So that's the last slide on the characteristics, experience preferences. Is there anything that you feel we ought to make sure is in one of these categories that's not necessarily didn't fit in the top 3 or 4? I mean, we're going to be looking for everything, but where do we put like some of the preferred skills? Or does this feel good to y'all, these top 3, top 4?
One thing I would like to interject under governmental experience, assistant in a larger unit. I think it's logical that we would be looking at someone that was an assistant county manager in another county, because we're not the highest paying place around. So we will probably not attract a county manager from, say, Alamance County. But I don't want to see a job description laid out where it will exclude private sector people from applying.
Yes, sir.
Because we may lose out on a pool of talent that we otherwise would benefit from.
Yes, sir. I mean, we won't exclude that. But I think that's where we'll list, here's what we're looking for. And I think, I mean, and that'll be when we have the job ad scripted, you can look and see if there's, you know, I would still strongly recommend a preference of some governmental background. Government is very different from the private sector. And I honestly think having some knowledge and experience of how government works is very beneficial. But you can have someone who, like Mr. Smith here, has come in and who is inquisitive and is asking questions and who wants to do the right thing. But there's a real level of commitment that it's going to take for someone from the private sector to learn all that they need to know about government, local government, to be effective. And I think if you look at someone from the private sector, that's got to be one of the first priorities is how are they going to quickly get up to speed? Because I think that's where you all are, especially in some of the areas around your financial management and your budgeting. It's going to be really important to get someone who is well skilled in those processes.
It also could be argued that it may be equally as important to have someone that is not part of the government system and has been there all their lives. They bring in fresh ideas, they bring in an approach of financial accountability and things that may very well benefit the taxpayers and the citizens of our county.
I agree, Mr. Dickerson. It is a balance, but if they don't have government background, then that's something you've got to set a high expectation of how they get that.
All I'm saying is I'd like to put a wide net, bring them all in, and we see who's best qualified.
Absolutely, absolutely. We hear you loud and clear.
So that's where you would have the minimum qualifications and a preference, right?
But we hear you on that, and we'll make sure that, you know, the job ad pertains that, and we will keep those, that in mind as we're going throughout this entire process.
Have you seen the private sector pay, like in a county manager's salary versus somebody that was doing something similar to that job in the private sector? The range of
Well, quite honestly, in my experience, the private sector typically pays a lot more for what you look at. I mean, because one thing you have to think about, this county is a $40 million entity. You have $40 million almost in revenues a year. You have 350 employees. That is not a small organization. And it takes a good level of skill to run it. And so you would have to have somebody who's really wanting to come and commit to continue to be in local government, but you're going to have to, even if it's local government, you're still going to have to set a salary that's going to attract someone to your community.
whether it be from the private sector.
Whether it be from the private sector or from the public sector. Because this is not a job for the inexperienced. And you're going to have to pay to get the experience that you need for a job well done. And it is very challenging right now in recruiting managers. I think we'll go ahead and be honest with you with that. The association has been helping with numerous manager searches around the state, and the applicant pool is very small. So you're going to need to do whatever you can to attract someone to Caswell. And the salary is one piece of it. And Amy's she'll, in the next section, she'll kind of touch on some of the salary information that we pulled together for you all to consider.
So your job description, like you could say that governmental experience is preferred, but if you don't have it, it doesn't shut you out from the process, correct?
Well, I think ultimately that will be what the board's choice is, because when you identified experience, is it experience in years of service regardless, or is there a preference for governmental experience? And I think that's something when we craft the job ad and bring it back to you for your consideration, we'll see if we've got that characterized accurately.
But you said the job the pool is very small.
Yes, sir.
When you say that, are you looking basically at governmental experience?
We're looking at any experience. In the smaller counties, smaller communities, they are having a very hard time attracting candidates. And some of it is salary. And I think a couple of recruitments that we're aware of have pulled them back and reconsidering how they might go out and search. So it's any type of experience. People are not applying for the job for county manager positions in the smaller to medium-sized counties.
So what you're saying is you're seeing the same thing for a county manager recruitment that everybody else is seeing for every other job they put out there nowadays. Yeah, we have the same problems.
Yeah, so I think, just to say that is, you want to put your best foot forward, because yours will not be the only manager job that's open right now. And so you want to be able to attract and show someone why they need to come and work here for you in Caswell County.
Is your place a small pool of candidates? Is it a small pool overall or a small pool of qualified candidates?
It's both. It's both. I think there's one county right now that had a small pool to start with and didn't find any qualified candidates. So they are going back out and trying to figure out, so what do you change to go back out to be successful to attract someone when the first recruitment wasn't successful? So that's one of the things, if we're learning from our colleagues, so we'll have some information from some of these less than successful recruitments that we can hopefully make some recommendations that might help you move toward the successful side of things. All right, well, I'm going to turn things back over to Amy, and we can revisit. If you have any thoughts, just jot them down and we'll come back to them.
So let's talk a little bit about the recruitment plan. We want to talk about the timeline, and we want to talk about the vacancy announcement. So the vacancy announcement is what you use to advertise the position, but it includes more than just information about the position. This is your opportunity to sell Caswell, just like John has said, to attract candidates and bring them into the community. And so some of the key components are, there's information that you want to include about Caswell. There's a lot of history in Caswell, and that's something that I would include in the vacancy announcement. You're home to some of the largest game lands for turkeys, over 16,000 acres. That would be something that might attract someone. I believe you have Hyco Lake, recreation for boating and swimming and that type of thing. You have a SR Farmer Lake, and also the Dan River runs through a portion of your county. And that may be attractive to someone who's interested in those type of recreational activities. And those are the type of things. I've recently written 2 vacancy announcements for 2 other communities, and I take a deep dive in learning about the county and the history and some of the amenities within the county. The second thing that you want to include in there for the applicants to know is something about your organization. You're a county manager, form of government. You have 7 commissioners, 5 that are elected within districts, and 2 that are at large. We'd want to put some information in there about your budget, a $40 million budget, 350 employees, and provide that information for the candidates. We would also take the information, the job profile information that you provided through the surveys. That would be out there to let the candidate know what you're looking for in your next county manager. We would also talk about some of the evaluation criteria. We're going to talk about that at the end, about maybe 12 different areas that you would use to evaluate through a structured evaluation tool after your interviews. We also need to address compensation in the announcement. There is an expectation of candidates with salary, and so you might as well put something out there. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And then we'll talk in the profile about, and the vacancy announcement, about the process. What do we expect the candidate to send in? Where do you submit your application? And a little bit about the timeline. And then there are things in there about federal compliance with federal laws and that type of thing that you would also want in the vacancy announcement. Any questions about that? So we've tried to put together, to give you an idea of how far to cast the net. So we'll start broad. There's the International City and County Managers Association, better known as ICMA. And most career managers or assistant managers or department heads are members of that organization. And it's an international organization to support managers and to also provide training opportunities. But in addition, they also hold managers accountable. And so I'm a credentialed manager, and there's a code of ethics that you subscribe to. And if there's any violations of those ethics, the ICMA will reach out to you, and you can be sanctioned by the ICMA and have your credentialed manager status removed. So it's very serious, and most managers, or all managers that are credentialed, take that very seriously. We would recommend that you advertise in their national brochure. Also, there's a North Carolina City and County Managers Association, and they have a website. They send out announcements, and we would recommend posting with the City and County Managers Association. Also, the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners has a website, and we also post job vacancies, and people know to go there as well. Also, as you know, I'm a member of the outreach team. There's 4 employees. I'm one of 4, and I have 25 counties. The other outreach associates may have contacts. And so once we have that vacancy announcement ready and the brochure, we would send it to the outreach team to distribute that to people in the profession that they know as well. And we would also put it on your website as well, and any other place that you would like it posted.
How far of an outreach will this go?
So
Outside the state? Will it go outside the state?
yes, sir. ICMA is an international organization, so yes, it would be across all states. Yes, sir. We want to, if you want to cast that net very, very wide, then yes, then we would put it in ICMA. But again, that's your choice.
And
These are just suggestions.
And I would just And one thing I would just add is, you know, government experience, you've got North Carolina, but you got 49 other states. And so also, to the question of making sure we don't exclude, private sector, are there particular websites that you want to see this also posted on, from an Indeed, Monster? I don't know if Ashley's got any ideas on, you know, where to make sure so that we cast the net as broad as we can.
The reason I asked that question, a lot of these police departments you see now will advertise for police chiefs across the nation.
Yep.
So I just want to see if this was that broad of an outreach.
Yeah, to hit local governments, ICMA is the first place people go when they're looking for government jobs.
But if the county uses Indeed, that would be an opportunity for the private sector. And so we'll use whatever avenues you currently use, but any of these or all of these, if that's your desire.
I see NC County Commissioners Association and NC City County Managers Association. Are there sister-like establishments in Virginia and South Carolina that we could advertise?
That's a good idea.
Yes.
Yes, there are.
In Virginia, there's Virginia Municipal League, and I'm not sure about South Carolina, but that's a great suggestion.
Yes.
Especially with Virginia, with your proximity. I have a friend that, you know, when I tell her I'm traveling to a county, I have to tell her, I said, well, I'm almost going to Virginia. And she knows what I'm talking about when I'm headed here.
But we can explore that and add that to the list as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And let's go to the next slide, Ashley. And here's where I really need some feedback as well. So I want to talk about the recruitment and selection schedule. And so it's at least a 3 to 4 month process. So I've thrown out some dates just for you to consider and to have some discussion with tonight. And so after this evening, we'll begin working on the vacancy announcement and the brochure to bring that back to you. And I'm being a little aggressive here, hoping that we can get that accomplished and get your approval, review and approval, so that we could post the vacancy announcement by October the 16th or thereabout. And then I would recommend that you can go 2 ways with an application deadline. You can have a hard deadline of maybe 6 weeks, and that would be November 30th. Or you could have it open until the position is filled. And so if you leave it open until the position is filled, that gives, one school of thought is if somebody misses the deadline, if you had a hard deadline, you still have it open. The only drawback with until the position is filled, sometimes people drag their feet and sometimes people need a deadline. So I'd like for you to consider what your comfort level is, either with a hard deadline or until the position is filled. If we started, I'm sorry, did I?
I would just say position field, I don't understand the deadline where you gain advantage with that. If somebody's really doing the job, I don't see them dragging.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
I'm just saying, I don't see the advantage to a hard deadline.
Okay, and that's certainly your choice. Even without a hard deadline, I would think around the time of November 30th, that we would begin the screening process in December. But Commissioner Hall, that wouldn't preclude that as other applications come in, that we continue reviewing them. The process that I'm working on now for another county, for assistant county manager, they have the position open until filled. And so this week, they're actually interviewing some candidates. But I've received some more applications, and I'm reviewing those this week and conducting a pre-screening so that they can consider additional candidates.
Amy, what we might want to do is in some cases where it's open until filled, we can, for those people who need a deadline, we could put in there when we anticipate starting the screening process. So that gives people the incentive to kind of make sure they're in that first round of screening.
And to give you an advantage, to tell you some of the advantages of open until field, if you close it, instead of having to relaunch it, and it looked like you had a failed process, if it's open until field, then it's a continuous process. So we'll do whatever the board's desire is. But I would think during the month of December, John and I would be conducting pre-screening. And then what we would do is hopefully maybe at your Tuesday, January 2nd meeting, it's hard to believe that we're already talking about 2024, that we would meet with the board, if that's your preference, and go over the pre-screening results. And then hopefully sometime in January, the board would then begin to interview the top candidates. So let me pause there and get your thoughts or questions about this process and timeline.
I'm not understanding the December, I mean, if someone's out of work, they're not wanting to apply for a job and wait till December to be talked to about it. Why are we waiting that long? Just to see someone?
Yes, sir, that's a good question. So as applications come in, John and I will review them, and John is going to talk a little bit more about the application process. But one of the things that has been used, a technique, is to do a pre-screening process. So it's a multi-level process. We narrow them down. We meet with you and we tell you who are the most qualified, those who meet the minimum qualifications, and those who are just not qualified at all, whether it's private sector or public sector. And then what we do is get your consensus on those that we screen. And John and I would meet with them and have a short interview with them. It includes Google searches and things like that, finding out background information. And that is to narrow the pool down to maybe 4 applicants for the board to then interview in the month of January.
On this application process of posting them to the field, you're still gonna have some type of date to basically kind of get all your stuff together to present it to us.
That's correct.
You kind of got to give yourself a date. Secondly, you're basically doing a first round interview. You're conducting interviews, doing all of that legwork to get what you just said set up. What day do you think that will be able to be done in December? As far as so basically if you're saying you get everything November 30th, or open into a field, but you give yourself a date. You start at that point in time of doing the process, or are you doing it as you go?
We're going to do it as we go. So we'll be, as soon as applications come in, we'll be reviewing applications. And as you know, the last week or two of Christmas, it's going to have to happen. And to Commissioner Holt's question, really, those pre-screening interviews are going to have to happen about the second week of December before people start traveling for Christmas and that type of thing. And you want to, the reason I have been a little aggressive in saying that we'll get the vacancy announcement ready by October 16th, during the month of December, people aren't thinking about filling out applications. So I'm trying to push this process just a little bit so that the last half of October and early in November, that you get quality applicants with experience to apply for the job. The first 2 weeks of December, John and I will be pre-screening, unless you don't want us to pre-screen, but we're trying to help. When we come back to you January 2nd, we're trying to have as much information about the candidate as possible to share with you so that you can narrow it down and then come up with your top 3 or 4 or 5 candidates. Again, it's your process. If we're recommending a process that has been used in other communities, but we'll do whatever your desire is, and then come back January 2nd, share the results, and then you schedule interviews immediately.
How long does the normal process stay open? I understand open until filled, I understand that totally. But normally, if it was a cutoff date, what are you looking at, 30, 45 days?
But this one is initially 45 days, but I'm thinking if around the beginning of December, beginning to mid, if there's a large number of good quality candidates and the screening goes well, then maybe mid-December that we would recommend closing the advertisement. You agree, John?
Let me ask this, if you had to, I'm gonna make something, up here. The mayor of Phoenix had retired and wants to move out of the country. I think this would be like an outstanding applicant. Would you be telling him he's gotta wait till December, or would you come to us and say, look, we got somebody that's really outstanding here, we need to take a look at it?
Well, I think that you would want to, we can do that, but you may preclude other outstanding applicants that come in as well. Typically, the way the process works is that you get applications in because you really don't want to preclude someone else coming in. I think what you want, you said you want to cast the net wide. If you cast the net wide, in fairness to all the applicants that have taken the time to fill out the application, you want to give us a chance to go through their applications, their resumes, their cover letter, and then whether or not to do a pre-screening. But I think it's a little bit unfair to not consider all the applications that come in. I think Chairman Dickerson has said, don't discount anyone. And so in order not to preclude anyone, we need the opportunity to review all the applications.
And one thing we could possibly consider, people are going to work to a deadline. So we could, and I don't know if your concern is that this is taking too long. I mean, one thing we could do is we could move the application. We could set an earlier date. Let's say before Thanksgiving is when we would start screening applications. So potentially we could come to you in December, if you wanted us to come in December with having done some of the pre-screening to kind of accelerate things, because people are you're either gonna have people who are gonna apply immediately because they're interested and they wanna make sure they're included, or you're gonna have somebody that's just gonna wait till the last minute, which is why I would recommend, even if it's open until filled, we put a date in there that says we will start screening applicants on this date, which tells people, if you want to be in the first round, get us your application by then.
Well, we're already in October. December, I'll be honest, December is a bad month for anybody. It looks like you got people traveling, they're going out of town, they're going to see things, you got Christmas, all that. I mean, you got, like I said, we're already a couple of days into October. I mean, I like to get it as quick as we can, but I don't want to rush the process to where we try to do it too fast.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And I think 45 days is reasonable.
If we would shoot for the pre-screening the first week of December, if the board would have a meeting the second week of December, I think we could do that.
I believe 30 days would be, you would get your qualified candidates within the first 30 days.
Yep.
You may get some stragglers after that. The ones that are truly interested in the job, I think would apply within 30 days of the job.
So I think maybe kind of accelerating that a little bit and maybe trying to get this pre-screening to you all, you know, us. Because the other thing is, if we are, let's hope we're going to get a lot of applicants. So then, you know, we'll need to wait till we can kind of go through all of them at once and screen them. But to Commissioner Holt's point, if we're not getting a lot of applicants, we may screen them as we go and give you all that feedback of, this thing has been open 3 weeks and we have 2 applicants. So how do we want to regroup and what might we want to do differently? So I think that's something where we can keep you apprised of the progress as things go along. Hopefully, we're going to be able to tell you you've got 15 or 20 applicants. So there's no reason, if we can't go ahead and know who the most qualified are, go ahead and start doing
We could do some of that in November.
Right, some of that pre-screening in November.
I think, you know, we just a small county, a little county too, that however, you know, we're gonna have candidates applying, but I don't think it's gonna get a whole lot of candidates. Because we only can pay so much, we got to face it. We can't pay it to the maximum of the county spending. I mean, just realize that we can't, but we still want to put applicants, you know? And so, you know, my thing is, you know, to get an application, bring it back. If you don't get them in, let it go, kind of move forward. Trying to have more voters out first.
Yes.
Any other thoughts? I think you've given us some good feedback about the schedule, and we'll rework the schedule to try to have different intervals for the pre-screening and that type of thing, so that we don't, to Commissioner Holt's thought, that we don't lose a candidate, but also balancing that we don't preclude anyone. Any other questions?
So you were saying you're gonna make changes to the selection schedule you had recommended?
We're gonna redefine it a little bit, Commissioner Gwynn. We're gonna redefine it to make sure there's different multiple evaluation points along the way, so that we get started quicker, we pre-screen faster, and I haven't said this, but our goal is to continually let you know where we are in the process and communicate with you.
Okay, I agree with different things that's been said, but I do know, as you and I think it was one of the commissioners mentioned, that December is the last month, if it's not before the 16th of the change.
So we have 2 weeks in a window in December to get with you. Yes, ma'am. The next slide, Ashley, please. So we've talked around a little bit this evening about salary. And so it is an important consideration. As I said earlier, your candidates are going to have some expectations, and we need to manage those. So John has put together some salary survey data just to give you an idea of salaries, one, from a regional perspective, and then secondly, she looked at it from a population range. So let's take a look at that. The top section really looks at the counties within the region, but you can see their populations far exceed that of Caswell County. And if you go to the far right-hand column, the 155,000 is the average for the region. This information is collected by the UNC School of Government. And so the latest one that's been released, I believe, is FY 21-22. They should be coming out with the 23 soon. But it's been updated by adding a cost of living of about 3% per year to bring it to today's level. So that average is about 155,000. But I think importantly, what you're looking for is, let's look within counties that have a similar population to Caswell County. And so if you look at the bottom, the average within the population range for this particular time frame is around 122,000. And we received some information from your HR director that the previous county manager was making $102,000 when he left. And so there's quite a wide discrepancy there. If you go back to your survey data says you want someone with some education, but you're looking for someone with some experience, public sector, private sector, but you want someone with some administrative experience. You want someone who has some financial experience, but you also want someone that can help you with strategic planning and build that vision, but also implement it. And there's quite a bit of competition from a salary perspective. I was talking with your manager, Tony, earlier today, and we're in an employee-driven world and not an employer one. And salary has become very competitive. Most counties have conducted recently a survey, or they're just implementing a study and the results. And so I would say, and that I don't believe you're going to attract the candidate you're looking for at $102,000.
Have you given any thought as to, now that you put these figures together, have you given any thought as to what that range would be? One, based on minimum experience, I mean, starting salary, any salary based on experience and qualification, or based on, you know, if you give it any thought.
So yes, sir, John and I had a long conversation yesterday to be prepared for that question. And your range is extremely low for a county manager. Ashley provided that to us last week, and the starting salary is $87,000. And so what John and I would offer to you is that probably the minimum should be around $105,000, and that's a minimally qualified candidate. And we would recommend somewhere between starting at 105 to about 135. Not that you're going to pay 135 right out of the gate, but you also don't want to set a range of 105 to 115, because then you have no growth. That candidate has no growth potential with cost of livings and that type of thing. Or you might not attract that mayor from another community. And so that's our recommendation for your discussion.
I know you've got it broke down counties within our region, then within the population range, I see those. But is there any way to break it down with counties that have a similar economic situation as what we're in? Which is, mostly agricultural, I guess, or.
So Bladen County, that's contiguous to my home county. Bladen County has a lot of land mass, Their population is 29,000, but their economics are very, very low. For agriculture is probably their top industry. And so that would be, that's an area that would be fairly close to Caswell. And Avery is in the western part of the state. Greene County's probably similar, very similar. John, do you have,
I could absolutely go in and pull, possibly looking at the tax bases. That might give us something to look at communities that have a similar tax base to Caswell. And also just a couple of things to note on here. You know, some of you'll see on here, several of the eastern, more eastern counties, because they are so rural, that's where some of them have had to pay a lot more to attract the manager. So it's that thing of, we don't have a strong tax base, so we're not a wealthy county, but to really attract somebody, you gotta, if you're willing to pay for the experience, and my guess is some of these managers are well experienced, so. But I could certainly run some additional counties to look at and see if that range still makes sense.
Let me ask you, with each one of these counties, is there any way to look at the fringe benefits, like they have free will to go to meetings in California, Texas, and that type of thing, or was there a limit on that type of thing?
Well, I think in terms of fringe benefits, every county, well, in North Carolina is in the local government retirement system. So that's good, and most states have that.
So 401K, because some counties may not contribute, some may contribute up to 8%. I know some counties do that. That would be one thing that we could look at.
I do think that's one of the things we should look at.
Okay,
But a lot of the agencies throughout the state will have a maximum of how much outside the county or outside the state to do travel. I wonder if you have any statistics on that.
I think there's some counties that kind of set a budget for travel. You know, if you get most managers, you want them to attend the NCACC conference. You'll want them to attend the city and county managers, their 2 meetings a year. And so we can come up with about what that cost would be. But most counties kind of managers lay out for the board what they anticipate or ask the board to go to and attend.
I would like for you to take a look at what we paid out to the last county manager in a year and those types of things, because that was carte blanche.
In terms of
The different conferences.
Different conferences throughout the U.S.
Okay. We can do that.
These numbers, this is just salary, this is nothing else as far as, is the manager use his personal vehicle and give him an allowance every month? Does the manager drive a county vehicle?
Correct.
But this is just salary.
Yes, sir.
How long would it take you to pull together the information that the commissioners have asked for, especially the recommendation made by Commissioner Yarborough in reference to the salary?
For the more rural counties, I should be able to do that no later than Wednesday, if not tomorrow.
May take us a little bit longer to get what Commissioner Gwynn's looking, but we'll work on that as well. That may not be as readily available online. That's something that we would have to maybe poll some counties.
I noticed within the region, you didn't include Guilford, Orange, Durham, because I'm sure that the level there is even higher than what you have here.
Yes, sir. I didn't even include those because that price tag, it would really skew the average. So I know they're in your region, but I didn't want to put them on there.
Well, I'm actually kind of impressed with Person County at 30, at the population of 39 and the salaries on that.
That's your neighbor too.
And they are very, popular, look, more population, but, which they have other industry, but they're still an ag-based county for the most part.
And they've lost some industry too.
They have.
I think they just recruited, no, Alaman's just recruited their old manager, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, Heidi York was in Person and now is in Alamance. Catherine Cathy is the manager in Person County.
And then, I would like to also see from a small county like Caswell, see how to benefit what the county manager has. So it's sick leave and stuff like that. So I'd like to see how that, for my veterans.
So one question I had, so on these salary ranges, it's your minimum and your maximum. Like Mr. Yarwood said, if we looked at it from the aspect of not providing a county vehicle, but giving a per diem for their own vehicle, would that kind of be subtracted from this amount, but it still be included, but you know what I'm saying, still be subtracted from it? If you weigh paying a per diem versus a county vehicle, keeping it up, maintenance, all of that, sometimes you're cheaper just to do the per diem.
And some managers don't want an assigned vehicle. They would prefer the allowance, but I think we can get some information as well about what other counties are paying, and that may help.
Yeah, but that could be, and I think that's where, looking at what our recommendation would be is to put a hiring range in the job ad. That then, once you select the preferred candidate, then you've got a whole lot of things to consider. Because a car allowance is compensation. So it's how much might that be in base salary, how much is in a car allowance, how much is in contribution to a 401k. So that's, and Amy will get to, I don't want to steal any of her thunder, she'll get to that in the last section of all the things that you consider. But you need some kind of hiring range to make sure that you don't have a bunch of people who make $200,000 applying for this job that we know you can't afford. So we're trying to kind of do some self-selection up front.
That'd be something as a board, we'll have to decide whether we want to do it, whether we want the county vehicle or not do anything at all.
Right, yeah. So that's just part of the negotiations when you have a selected candidate. So we'll get you some additional information, but at least from a beginning of the hiring range, does 105 feel okay? That's kind of the minimum?
Where were we at on the salary when the past county manager, was it 102?
102.
Is that with the new ones?
With the July 1 budget increase, everyone got a 4.5% increase.
That's on that.
Yeah.
So that was included.
That's exactly that.
The 102 includes that increase.
I thought it did.
It did.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, because it's what the pay is after July 1. Yep.
I think 102, your pre-fact salary, plus looking at his salary in 6 months. Have to be on time.
Well, I think if you do the 102, you're going to get I mean, I think that's a decent starting point, 102, 105, somewhere in there, but that's gonna bring you minimum, it depends on where you're gonna put that, the end of that range as to kind of the type of candidates you'll attract.
I think that's the thing, most of them will look at the second number.
Excuse me?
Most people will look at that second number.
Yes, sir, you're absolutely right. But I can certainly, if we kind of want to table that, what that second number is until I bring back the additional information, we can do that. And we'll try and see if we can, see if we still feel like the 105 to 130, 135 makes sense, or if, I don't know, it'd be interesting when we bring back these more rural communities, if the number goes up or down. I'm not sure what the answer will be. So,
Earlier, you didn't think 102 would attract anyone, and that the minimum should at least be 105, so you would.
but 102, 105, it's like, you've at least got to be six figures. You've got to be over, you've got to be 100 plus.
So you wanna put in, what did you say you wanna put in now, the 102 or the 105?
Well, we're gonna come back with some more information, not to jump to the end, but I believe you meet on the 16th, is that correct? So my thought would be that we take this information from today. We may have some holes in the vacancy announcement, but Jonna provide the feedback about the rural counties, what we can find out about travel allowances and that type of thing. But if the two of us come back with the vacancy announcement and try to fill in those holes at the October 16th, would that be workable?
Yeah, because I'm not prepared today to give you a salary.
And we understand that. Yes, we're throwing a lot at you at one time, and I don't want to back you into a corner. And so I thought that if we come back with that vacancy announcement, you can see what it looks like. In the meantime, Jonna can provide some additional information by email, or you can get it from your clerk. And then maybe on the 16th, we can come to some agreement and fill in the holes so that we can begin that announcement, if that will work.
I have no problem with it. Can you send an email out once y'all start this process of saying these are the holes we need, because we went over so much?
Yeah, we can send that to you in advance.
You know, we can take a look at it and say, well, we got this, this, and this, and, you know.
We can tell you what key decisions need to be made in order to send out that announcement where we need your consensus.
Yep.
Actually, I think Jonna's up next. She's going to talk about the application process.
Ashley, if you can go ahead, thank you. So just, what we want to do is we want to take as much off your plate as we can. And so, we're offering to screen the applicants for you. And we'll get to that kind of screening process in a second. But here are the things that we are just, from a process standpoint, are recommending. First thing, we're going to say this several times to you. These processes have to be kept extremely confidential. Oftentimes, the communities that these managers are coming from, they may not know they're looking for other jobs, and we really want to respect that. And oftentimes, if you can't tell a candidate that it will be kept confidential, they may not apply. So we will make sure that that's clear. We would like to require a cover letter and resume in addition to the application. You can tell a lot from those two pieces of information that you can't get from an application. We are proposing that all the candidates will send their application and their cover letter and resume to Amy's email address. And she and I are going to work on a way to kind of share those applications and keep those so that we can work through all of those. And then what we intend to do is, as we get those applications, we will put together a list. We will give you, here's all the applicants. We'll give you some highlighted information. So when we come to provides you kind of the results of the pre-screening. We'll have the list of here's who we consider most qualified, middle qualified, and not at all qualified. So you will see the whole applicant pool, but then our recommendation would be that we can bring you the resumes of those top candidates for your review and consideration.
Do, y'all do a thorough background investigation?
Typically, that's not done until you have the selected candidates, but we will do we'll do a lot of the Google searching, the seeing if we can find those any warning signs. But typically you don't do those background checks until you've got a selected candidate.
Will these applicants be, all of the paperwork be done in a closed session if some of them don't want it?
Yes, ma'am. Everything other than discussing the process will be in closed session under personnel items. So when we do the pre-screening, when you do the interviews, all of that will be kept in closed meeting.
And if they don't provide everything that's asked for, I'm referring to the cover letter and resume in addition to the application, will it not even be considered? Because you can't follow directives to start with.
Well, again, that is up to you all. I tend to think if we say it's required and they can't follow directions, that is kind of a warning sign. But if the people are really interested in the jobs, that's pretty standard.
You learn a lot from the cover letter. You learn about their writing skills.
So then if we go to the next slide, just to kind of look at the pre-screening and why we think that's important. Most importantly, just to save your time, but not only just screening the applications, but then as Amy has mentioned, doing some of those initial interviews, having some of those, and we'll probably do those, most of those will be virtually, I would assume, but really kind of digging into their resume, asking them any questions about things that we might have found during our online searches about the person. What are their potential red flags? Really digging into those top priorities of yours from an administrative leader, financial management, the strategic planning, and then also those characteristics. See how we can tease some of that out during a pre-screening so that we're bringing you, based on our professional experience, the strongest candidates to make best use of your time. I think I kind of touched on all of these. I mean, because we want to make sure that they're meeting your basic requirements. Otherwise, we don't want to put them in front of you. And again, we will share everything with you, but we think there's a lot of value in us doing some homework and helping you narrow down the top candidates.
This brings us to the last section for the evening. We want to talk about the interview and selection process. We'll talk about some of the key elements of the interview process, things to keep in mind, talk about the evaluation criteria, and that's important to make sure that each candidate is evaluated consistently among the same criteria. And then talk a little bit about the end, that once you come up with a selection, what's that next step? We'll begin first with the interview logistics. We've talked quite a bit about the pre-screening results, and John has done a good job in covering that. One of the things we want you to think about is paying reasonable travel expenses for interviews. So let's go back to Commissioner Holt's example of the mayor of Phoenix has applied. So it's fairly customary among other counties that if you have someone that's in another state, that the county, and they're an applicant that you're very interested in, that the county pays for a hotel room for one night, and that the county would even pay travel expenses. Let's just say they're in driving distance, you pay some, the IRS rate. Or if they're on the other side, the West Coast, that you pay for an airline ticket. I'm not asking you to make that decision this evening, but that is, if you have applicants and you're casting that wide net, if you have applicants from other areas, they are going to ask about, will the county pay travel expenses?
But that would have to be a pretty, not a guarantee, not the word I'm looking for, but they would have to have significant, credentials, whatever, to even get to that point that it got to that.
Yes. By the time that you are ready to interview, I'm hoping our goal is to bring you a strong slate of candidates, ones that you would want to consider paying, or would be willing to consider paying travel expenses.
In the private sector, a lot of times they'll do Zoom, pre-Zoom. That definitely should be an option.
So to your point, Commissioner Holt, I would say that could certainly, let's just say that we brought you 4 candidates. If you had someone that was in another state that couldn't easily get here, you might want to do 1 virtually to narrow it down from 4 to 2. But I would recommend that a final interview, that you would want to meet that candidate in person before you made a final decision. But it is a way of kind of narrowing that pool. Any other questions or thoughts about that? Then we'll work on establishing the interview schedule. Once you decide and agree with the ones to be interviewed, John and I will contact the candidates, set up the interviews, and we'll do all the coordination. Again, as Jonna says, many of you have full-time jobs, are very busy. We want to take that work for you not to have to worry about that. We'll develop interview questions and for the board to utilize that are tied to that evaluation criteria. You want to make sure that you treat each candidate equally and that you ask the same questions to each candidate. And there are some questions by federal law you just can't ask. You can't ask their marriage, you can't ask how many children there are or how old their children are, things like that. So we'll have a set of questions. Okay, Ashley? Let's talk a little bit about the interview process itself. Again, as John has said, it's a confidential process. The only name that will ever be released publicly is the candidate that you offer the job to. Anybody else that has applied, those names will never be released. Yes, sir.
No, go ahead.
Okay. The interviews would recommend that the board set aside an hour for each interview. If you have a pool of 4, and there's a second interview, you may want to consider an exercise, whether it's an oral presentation, a written exercise, especially if you have a particular area that you want them to be strong in.
That was my next question. I know y'all will be doing a lot of this legwork. Interviews should be kept to an hour. What would you, and I know it's the board's decision, how many applicants we want to actually interview down to, but you're talking an hour per, and that's either gonna have to be a special meeting to do this, or if we did it after the regular meeting, it's gonna take a while. How many people do you see as being, getting to this number, 3 to 5?
I would think our goal would get it, the pre-screening, to get it down to 6, give you the pre-screening results and get it down to a manageable number of 4 or 5, hopefully 4. But we're hoping there's a large number, and that would be a good number to have to get it down to a small pool. We want every board member to participate in the interviews. Each board member asks questions. You can take turns asking questions so that you feel a part of the process. And then at the end of that day, then we'll work with you on the criteria and determining if you believe a second interview is necessary, what your next steps are.
And I think some of this will depend on what we end up with. If we ended up with there's only 2 candidates you're really interested in seeing, probably recommend doing those in person and go from there. So I think we've written this process with the hopes and the assumption that you have lots of choices, but we will adapt as we see what the results are.
So what we've tried to do here is develop about 12 criteria that you would use, or we recommend you use, to evaluate the candidates. And we've really tried to tie it back to what you said you wanted in the surveys. So on the day of the interviews, we're going to have a tool for you to rate each candidate on based on this criteria. And so I'm going to go over this fairly quickly, but the first criteria, of course, is the education. What education do they have? What's their background? What's their experience? And are they an ICMA credentialed manager? And then you're looking for someone with administrative skills. Leadership is an important part of it. And some of you on your survey said that you're looking for a manager that can mentor staff, that can guide them and inspire them. So leadership and management skills came out in the survey. The next set of criteria is communication skills. That's one area that the board is interested in. That's one of the attributes you wanted your candidate to have. And that's important because your manager participates in your meetings and needs to be able to communicate with the department heads, the community, but with the board as well. You also want someone who understands governance. An understanding of local government, how government operates, and some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that are facing Caswell County. And then you're looking for someone who subscribes to a code of ethics. That's an important part of it, and someone who's going to ensure legal compliance. You have an attorney, but your manager is an important part of making sure that there's compliance from the departments to the employees and all of your policies and procedures, daily operations. The next slide talks about long-term planning and vision. One of your top 3 attributes was you wanted someone that was skilled in strategic planning, somebody that was visionary, but also somebody that is process-oriented, somebody who can implement what your goals are and your vision for Caswell County. And adaptability. You need someone who's flexible. There's no regular day in county government, and you have to be flexible. And the best example I can give you of that is COVID. When COVID came on, you had to be very flexible and agile in making decisions and putting together new operational plans to be able to provide services during the shutdown when the governor closed, but also protect your employees. You have to have someone who's flexible. And then the reference checks and the background checks are important as well. So I went through that criteria quickly. So let me stop here and ask you, do you have any questions? Do you have any other criteria that you think is important, or any of these that you don't feel should be considered in the process?
You were asking these questions just on this last section.
And all of them. I went through all 12 pretty quickly, but any of them,
Back at the very beginning,
yes, sir.
you were naming off all the advantages here. I would like for you to put in the cost of living here being some substantially lower than other places.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you, Commissioner Holt.
I don't know if it's the cost of living here, when you were saying the positive things that it has.
Yes, sir.
That, one of the other things is, I know we're a rural county, but if you look at all the surveys, you see it on Facebook and other places, we're usually like Cary, Mavin, those areas falling like top 10 in the country. So we're just barely off the bubble of most desirable places to live. I hate to bring out the county, but let's just say Hyde County. It's way down, it's pretty much just farmland. This would be a lot more desirable, I think, to more people than to live somewhere like that. So I would like it seem, if you're pushing the positives of here, that we are really one of the most desirable places in the country to live. We're just barely out of the bubble of say, Cary, Mavin, Hillsborough.
And to that point, that's what that vacancy announcement is for. That's your opportunity to sell this community. You're right on the Virginia border, and you're close to other larger metropolitan areas, but you have a small town, rural lifestyle. But you can travel somewhere to work, but you have a lifestyle, country, rural lifestyle that some people may be looking for. There's a lot that Caswell has to offer to a candidate and a family. Any other thoughts about the evaluation criteria? If not, we'll go to the final slide this evening. And this is, once you've conducted the interviews and you have the candidate, then we would conduct your reference checks for you, and then sit down and go over the reference checks with you and give you the results. And then your HR director would, as they normally do the background check and the credit check. Then that next step is where the salary comes into play and the benefits and drafting a contract. And there are templates out there. ICMA has a template for a contract. Your county attorney could write one as well. But in the contract, that's where you would spell out and agree to the compensation. You would talk about the other benefits, any 401k match that you would consider, health insurance, and any other benefits. The other thing to consider is the moving and relocation expenses. And so if someone's coming out of county, then normally the local government pays the moving expenses. And the way that I've customarily seen that happen is you have a candidate get 3 quotes from 3 moving companies and accept the lowest one, or that's the bottom line that you would reimburse for. But that's something else that you need to consider, is the moving expense for a family coming here. And then going back to Commissioner Gwynn, it's not a bad idea to lay out in the contract the membership dues that you're willing to pay. And for ICMA, to be a credentialed manager and a part of ICMA, there are annual dues. And so lay that out. And also any continuing professional education and conferences. You want to start off like you want to end up. And it's better to put something in the contract that addresses that. And then you also want to have something in the contract that speaks to resignations or separation and what happens at that point. And so I think we've come to the end
I
of.
have one thing.
Okay.
Just hit me.
Sure.
If you don't mind.
No, not
jumping
at
in.
all.
I think probably as Amy and I have both been going through this, there's an assumption, my assumption has been that you will require them to be a Caswell County resident. So I wanted to make sure that is, because I just think it's assumption, because for me, I think that's extremely important. Even as a department head in my career, I felt that if I was working for that community, it was important for me to live there.
But somebody will ask.
Somebody will ask, and to Mr. Holt's point, where you're close to other areas that might be more attractive, I think that's just something we need to put in the vacancy, is that the expectation that there will be a residency requirement within so many.
Right.
That's what I was gonna say, within, you're gonna have to give them a time frame. Within so many days, you have to have located here.
Yep.
Yeah, with the housing market the way it is, they may have to find some temporary residents before they actually fully move here. I've seen that in other communities, and they give them a year to be a permanent resident.
I just wanted to make sure that was a valid assumption that residency is expected.
Yeah, if they're hired, yes, they would have, if they're not, then they would have to.
Right.
So, Mr. Chairman and board members, John and I have tried to lay out and give you things to consider for that well-defined structured process. And I know it's been a lot, but we've had copies made so that you can reference that. I think John and I have our homework that you've given us. John is going to work on getting some of the questions answered. I'm going to write the vacancy announcement. And with your permission, we would like to come back, maybe have a short meeting before the 16th. However you want to do it, I don't want to jump to any conclusions, but we'd like to come back and shore all that up so that we can, I get you're anxious and ready to move forward. And so we'd like to have some questions answered. To Commissioner Rose's point, we can tell you ahead of the meeting what decision points need to be made. So let me stop there and ask us any questions that you have, any thoughts.
Any direction.
Any direction you want to give us.
I'd like to thank y'all for what you have done. It's a lot of work went into it. A lot of forethought went into it. And I appreciate it.
When you do the background reference checks, do you contact their former employees? And if so, do you get any kind of useful information when you do that? Do they tell you, hey, they worked here from this date to this date, but they don't give you a personal, reference saying they think they'll be good for the job or not? How much forthcoming do you get from the people?
I think it depends on if you wanted us to ask them to give you all references from former employees, we can certainly do that.
Employers.
Or employees, people who have worked for them. I mean, yeah, people.
But do you find if you contact them, is it worth your while? Will they talk to you and tell you anything?
Oftentimes not if you call that county unless that person has already let them know and they're willing to give a regular reference. Most of the time when you ask for references for these candidates, they're not going to be coming from their current county. They're going to be from previous employer, people who they've worked with in other professional arenas. But you're right. I mean, typically you get this employee worked here from this date to this date, especially if you call the HR department, because they're trained to just only give you that. But if they listed someone as a reference, they should have done their homework and that person should be willing to speak with us. But you're right that we will, at least from the standpoint of verifying things on their resume, we may reach out to those HR departments to confirm that.
That being said, are there any other questions from the board? Not, appreciate y'all coming in tonight, all the extra time you put behind it. It's been very informative.
Okay,
And we'll see you on the 16th.
thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much.